be fine.
Okay.
All
Right. I'm
righty.
going to start
So this
recording.
is going to mostly just be a regular conversation. I don't want to do like a Q&A. This is just a chat between friends type of video type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's more fun because, we're all kind of serious to a degree when we talk to our audience. And we kind of have like a point that we're trying to get to. And for the most part, I don't think that they just hear us BS, like how we do on Discord and we just talk about stuff. So I think that
Yeah.
might be kind of interesting for people to hear. But I mean, one of the things that I was kind of curious, I was actually thinking before we got on here, and I'm like, I wonder what Paul thinks of 2019. That just wrapped up, and I know we both talked to Tom about it. But for me personally, 2019 was very formulaic. There really wasn't anything that I found surprising. There was maybe one or two things, but did you find anything surprising, or did it pretty much just go the way that you thought it was going to go?
Well, it was like I think it was that AMD hammered home their advantage in the desktop, pretty obvious, and then in the graphics card side of things, I just found it was like, let's find a tier where we can slot a graphics card in. And there was nothing really spectacular that blew away a segment of the market, if you know what I mean. It was just kind of, where can we slot our graphics cards in to compete with each other? Other than that, there was nothing really kind of mind-blowing about 2019. I suppose the fact that RAM prices and SSDs were really cheap, that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but I mean, they came down to SSDs came down more, but RAM was basically what it was in 2016. So it just went up real high and then just came back down, which ironically enough, I've been in the market long enough, that happens every time with RAM. It starts off really expensive, then it goes really low, and then it gets crazy expensive for a while, and then towards the end of its life cycle, then it gets cheap again. So
yeah, it's kind of like if you look at the way the property market goes, it's like there's peaks and troughs in property, and people are like, oh, I'm going to get screwed by buying a property, or I'm going to make loads of money buying property. The truth of the matter is that there's always peaks and troughs, but on average it goes up slightly over time, and that's the same with RAM. I think it just gets a little bit more expensive every year, but every now and again they have extreme highs and extreme lows.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know that they like to price fix like every 6 or 7 years or something, and that might have something to do with it. But yeah, RAM prices, if they're crazy, it's like GPUs, when the mining boom happened, prices went nuts, and if you could just hold out for a couple of years, things will eventually come back to normal-ish, I guess. But
I think the big takeaway for me from 2019 was really the graphics card market and how AMD and Nvidia decided not to compete with each other. And to some people, it might look like that's like them working together to sort prices out, but I don't think that's what's happened. I think just AMD have went, if you make a $350 graphics card and I can beat you, I'm going to price it at the same price. If you make a $300 graphics card and you're faster than me, I'm going to be slightly cheaper and go for a bit in the middle, which kind of annoyed me and annoyed other people. But it's the way AMD is going forward with the graphics market. It's the way they're going forward with their pricing structure. And it's just kind of funny to watch two companies that are supposedly in competition with each other, not really competing with each other, trying to find ways not to have a fight.
it's really, yeah, I agree. That's really the biggest surprise for me from last year. I mean, Intel did exactly what I figured Intel was going to do. AMD on the CPU side, exactly what I was expecting. Nvidia did exactly what I was expecting. But just like how you said, AMD's, I guess you could say, unwillingness to fight or just lack of interest. Perhaps they just realized that they have their fan base and their fan base are going to buy their products regardless of price, as long as, you know, they're reasonably priced relative to their competitor, and just not really worrying about the market share. It really snapped for me, or really clicked in when they launched Radeon VII. You remember that at CES? Yeah. I'm like, they really don't care. I mean, that was such a stopgap measure that you knew that there was something wrong with Navi, or it was going to be delayed, or something was going to happen. Navi was actually better than I was anticipating because of Radeon VII, but like you said, the biggest thing is they just aren't competing, and it's not collusion, it's just each company is doing what's best for themselves.
Yeah, I think with Radeon 7, I think you kind of, you kind of tried to give them a pass on Radeon 7 because you knew it was a desperation move. You knew Lisa Su we're going to release Navi, and there was that video, as I said before, on the AMD YouTube channel where it clearly says we're going to talk about something in a couple of months, and it was a Navi, so they were going to do it. And then obviously something happened, and they were like, right, what are we going to do now? Well, we have loads of MI60 sitting around. Let's just cut them down, call them Radeon 7, and release a limited quantity, because sure, Nvidia gets away with doing that with certain graphics cards for months. So why not? Like with Pascal, how many of their SKUs of graphics cards were not in stock for God knows how long? So
1080s and 1070s were sold out until August. They launched June and July, so about 2-3 months.
Yeah. So when your competition get away with it, why don't we? And we knew that it was going to be expensive. Like everybody said, it was going to be expensive. It's going to be bizarre, and we were all like, and it probably won't beat a 2080. Well, there it was. It didn't beat a 2080, and you could overclock it and probably make it beat a stock 2080. I had a 2080 and I had a Radeon 7, and yes, Radeon 7 was faster, and Radeon 7 does overclock better than Navi. I can guarantee of that, but that's just because overclocking those shaders, like a lot of the time with GCN, shaders stall, and because shaders stall, overclocking them means that you're making the shaders that are actually doing something do things quicker.
Right. Yeah. It's just an overpowered architecture for gaming.
Yeah.
That's why it was so crazy seeing RDNA with 2560 shader cores beating out the was it 3500 and something on the Radeon 7 in some titles. It's just like crazy when the GPU actually does what it's supposed to do.
It is literally a push. I've had one, and I have a 5700 XT. And I can't tell the difference. I just there is no difference. Only thing I will say is in Vulkan titles, the GCN card is still faster. But other than that, it's a push.
Yeah, which is really impressive. But here, I want to float this theory out to you. I was actually thinking about this the other day and kind of why they may have done Radeon 7 and why Navi might have been so late. Is if you remember back late 2017 or even maybe it was 2018, everybody was still expecting GlobalFoundries 7 nanometer to come online. And I was like, maybe AMD was planning on putting their GPU lineup at GlobalFoundries 7 nanometer. And then once that fell through, they had to redesign the chip because GlobalFoundries 7 nanometer is obviously different than TSMC's. That might have been the delay, and they kind of scrambled to repackage it to work at TSMC. That could have been the reason why it was delayed and why, they are basically harvesting into their wafers, which they need for Ryzen. They really should just make Zen on those right now because they're all selling, especially the high-end stuff. And that's where they're making all their money. But I think that might be what happened. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there was, whether they were going to make graphics cards at TSMC, GlobalFoundries and CPUs at TSMC, or vice versa, or even offload some of the SKUs to lower SKUs to GlobalFoundries, whichever process was better, because nobody knows whether GloFo's 7 nanometer process would have been better or not. So maybe they're going to use one or the other to make chips and whatever. But yeah, it makes sense. And then what would have to happen? It's not necessarily a redesign, but it would mean you'd have a longer lead time into getting enough products to actually be able to launch a product, if you know what I mean. Like just to get enough volume of chips, you'd have to wait maybe a couple more months,
Yeah, I'm thinking that had something to do with it, because if they had to redesign the chip, tape it out, basically rebuild Navi from GlobalFoundries to TSMC, to me that makes a lot of sense. We might never know the true answer on this, but I just think that might have something to do with it. I just simply forgot about GlobalFoundries 7 nanometer because, I guess that was like 2 years ago now. They pretty much said, nope, we're not doing it, just out of the blue, which was hilarious.
Do you know how close they were to 7 nanometer? It's actually frightening.
Oh yeah, no, that's the whole thing. They were on track. Them and TSMC, they were like neck and neck, and that's why I'm like, okay, cool. Looks like they're firing on all cylinders, and then they're just like, no, we're good.
Yeah, they had 4 machines ready to turn on, 4 machines ready to go, and another 2 machines that they use for testing to do 7 nanometer. And as far as I know, it was EUV as well. So they were ready to go. They were good to go. And then somehow their parent company said, you're not profitable, and 7 nanometer is the reason why you're not profitable. Sell all those machines. And they had to sell all those machines. So they will go to 7 nanometer, but they'll go to 7 nanometer when 7 nanometer is a cheap process, and they'll probably buy back the machines they sold for a cheaper price.
Well, I mean, from a business perspective, it might just make more sense for them to be 1 or 2 nodes behind everybody else, because then they don't have to invest all that money. And then, like you said, they could just buy, you know, what everybody else is offloading at maybe 1/10 the cost, and then just make money off of it. So, I mean, perhaps that's the thinking, but you know.
Well, they're massively profitable now. They're actually making money for the first time in years.
Well, that would probably make sense why. So, yeah. All right. Looks like it was just all business, which, you know, that's kind of ties into what you were saying. It's all just business now.
Yeah.
The passion, you know, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, the whole market, you could tell, had a lot more passion. I think nowadays it's all business. And that's the reason why, like me, you know, I do a lot of videos. It's like I don't really care about any games being released in the past, I don't know, 5 years, and nothing coming out looks that interesting. Hardware I'm not really that interested in right now, but there is some interesting stuff coming down the road. But there's just no passion there. There's no excitement. It's just business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to look at, like, I would say if you were going to release something, if you were going to buy something, right? If you wanted to support somebody, you should be supporting people who it's their art rather than their career. So, like, you know, when somebody makes a beautiful game and they make it because they wanted to make a game, not because they wanted to become rich or whatever, but because they wanted to make a game, that there was no other game out like the game they wanted to make. Or when somebody makes a graphics card because they love hardware and they invest so much time into a new feature in a graphics card that nobody's ever thought of before. That is when you should support somebody. But when companies are just doing stuff for shareholders to increase the amount of money that shareholders get, it's when things just become unexciting. And the two companies, all 3 of the big companies, silicon manufacturers, they're just after that 65% crust. They're not after, AMD are just trying to push a 65% margin because they're the best now. That's what they deserve, because Intel got away with it for years. So why shouldn't we get away with it on the CPU side? And on the GPU side, if we can't sell the amount of graphics cards that Nvidia do, well, we're just going to start selling them at the same price, because it doesn't matter. Like, we just should make the same profit margin. And what's the point in taking these wafers away from Zen if we can't make good margin on the graphics cards? So just do it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just business. One of the biggest things, like when I think of graphics cards back in the day, do you remember that Apple conference or whatever when they first showed off the GeForce 3 and Doom 3, that demo? With the first time where they had real lighting and shading going on.
I remember the Doom demo, but
yeah, it happened at an Apple conference. I just remember the Doom demo as well because I didn't care about Apple. But but you know, they had John Carmack out on the stage, and if you've ever seen this guy, like, he's super passionate about everything that he does, and that's what sold, you know, the GeForce 3 and, you know, graphics cards of that day was his passion for the games that the hardware would play. And we just don't really see that sort of connection. You know, you don't see the passionate developers anymore. You don't see them on stage with the GPU manufacturers to push new technology. It was just Jensen on stage, you know, back in 2018 going, ray tracing, it just works. Ray tracing, you know, there wasn't any developers out there really passionate about it and talking about, like, why it's real cool and what they're going to do in their games. And that's when I knew that feature really didn't matter, is because there was nobody out there besides Jensen talking about it. And I think that's, for me anyway, that's the big disconnect is, you know, like how you were just saying, the all business aspect is what's killing me. And I really want to see more passionate players out there.
Yeah, it should be somebody's craft, not somebody's job. Like, if you look at RTX is funny because RTX is really, really good for what it was designed to do, which is like inference and you know, helping accelerate rendering and get in like making movies, like
renders, yeah.
CGI movies. Yeah, it's really good at that. It's really, really good at that. It's faster than anything that ever existed ever. It's unbelievable.
I mean,
like
that's also what it was designed for.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But when if you know how much effort goes into doing that, and all it's doing is saving the developer time. Oh, sorry, not the developer, the movie studio time. Well, then it's a good product. But the problem is when you want to cut down that product to sell it to gamers, you're left over with this stuff that you can't remove from your die, and you have to make a reason for it. So Nvidia's whole shtick was, let's get Jensen out talking about how great this is, and he's marching up and down because his job now is to convince a lot of developers to use this tech, which they do not want to do. Developers do not want to use fixed function hardware. So the last thing they want to do is use fixed function hardware because it's code that might never be used by somebody out there ever.
Right. Well, I mean, Nvidia could. I mean, if they really wanted to. We've seen it once the 1660 series came out. They stripped out all the tensor and RT cores. You know, they could have redesigned the chips without those, which they probably should have done. I mean, if we're going to be really honest about this, they could have shrunk the dies, maybe price things down a little bit cheaper, and yeah. But they chose not to because of what you said. It's like, well, we're going to make these for professionals. Let's sell the dregs to these people. We just have to charge them more money. Let's see if they'll bite. And I think that's really what the thought process was. Let's see if they'll bite.
Yeah. Yeah, and the most disgusting thing about that is that the 2070 is the best-selling RTX card out of the lot of them, which is fucking crazy because that thing came out at 600 quid. Like, who pays 600 quid for what is essentially an overpowered 60 class card, which is what it is.
What was it? $499 to $599, or was it $599 to $699?
It was $499 to $599. Yeah, $499 and $599 for and not only that, you were getting like for the $594, it was a $499 one. You were getting like a worse die for the first God knows how long as well.
Right.
Non-B SKU or something like that. But what it'll show you, what it'll prove to you, like I've often said it, and look, it doesn't matter what SKU and it doesn't matter what I say, but I've often said that like that is a 60 card, and the proof of it being a 60 card is that AMD went on stage and you could see RX 680 in their slide. Now granted, God only knows what happened there, but like if you were going to expect AMD to release a mid-level card and perform with a mid-level card, well, it slightly beats a 2070. Therefore, it is a mid-level card as well. They're both mid-level cards. And because Nvidia charged what they charged, AMD rightfully so charged what they charge. And even then, like that's a fucking 200 quid discount. That's what it is. Because if you look at it, it was a 600 quid card at launch. So now, why wouldn't AMD launch a 400 quid card? That outperforms it. It's actually a value. It's a great deal.
Right, and that's what I was trying to argue, I think, a few videos ago, is AMD's just going to look at Nvidia, price their stuff accordingly, and go, we're better. And they'll be justified with whatever price that they put. And there's really no arguing with that. And the only way that will change is if people stop buying, which I don't see that happening either. As long as the price to performance is somewhat reasonable, people will do it. And then when it comes back to the 70 class, that's what enthusiasts buy. Like a lot of people think that everybody buys 2080 Ti's. No, it's the X70 class GPU. That's what makes or breaks the generation. And that's why Turing had a lot of problems at first, is because the 2070 was bad. For an X70 class card, that was a terrible, terrible upgrade. It wasn't until the 2070 Super came out that things really turned around, because that was at least halfway decent. If you had a 1070, going to a 2070 was stupid, but going from a 1070 to a 2070 Super is still pretty good. And
because that's what you're supposed to get. Like that's what you're supposed to get all along.
Oh yeah.
Like that was the 70 class card.
Oh yeah, it's the 104 die cut down. You know, that's what we typically expect from Nvidia, at least.
Yeah, Nvidia went, right, it's been two years. We've actually outperformed. We've gotten better performance than we normally get for that tier, right? Granted, at the high end, they didn't really get a massive leap, right? But in the 60 class card, they got a massive leap, like a crazy leap. And in any other year, that card would have just been called a 2060 Ti and probably cost 300 quid rather than 250 quid. But Nvidia being Nvidia, knowing that they didn't have any competition and nobody was bothering with them, and AMD were off dicking around somewhere. Maybe they heard the rumors that they were delayed as well. Just went, you know what? We'll just charge what we want, and it outperformed. Like, it damn near comes close to like about 15% more performance, and you could probably call it a 70 class card, but because it's not 15% faster, and it's 600 quid rather than 400 quid is what a 70 class card used to go. That's what makes it stupid.
Yeah, I'm going to throw up a chart while people are watching this. I actually did this chart here. Basically, it's every X70 class, generation to generation, and the performance increase. And I'll just summarize the last few. So going from Kepler to Maxwell, so 770 to 970, you got plus 43% performance. And you went from $399 to $329. So you actually got 43% more for $60 less. Now, that's the anomaly. Typically, the prices don't move. That's when AMD was heavily competitive. All right, so going from the 970 to the 1070, you got 47% performance increase, gen over gen. But you got the price hike from $329 back up to $389 to $449. So basically prices went back to where they were. So that seemed kind of bad because the price jumped and the performance increase was about the same. But like I said, it looks like the 970 is kind of the anomaly. And then going from the 1070 to the 2070, you only got 37% more performance, and you went from $389 to $449 to $599 to $699. So you were spending infinitely more money, and your performance increase was only 37%. So you got worse performance than going from the 970 to 1070 or 770 to 970, and the price jumped up over $200. So that is why that was so bad.
Yeah. The 1070, actually, I really liked that card. I had one. I really, really liked that card. I thought it overclocked like a monster. Did 2100 megahertz, like, without doing anything special to it. The memory overclocked like crazy as well. And it played every game I threw at it at the time. But I want to bounce something off you and tell me how you feel on this, right? You know, the way, like, we're being upsold on a tier, basically, from both manufacturers. So AMD have made this new tier that they never had before, which is the 5700 XT, which is like a high to mid-tier card, right?
It's a low high end. Yeah,
low high end, right? Which they never really had before. They had like a half of the mainstream card of the top. They usually had 40% of the performance of a top tier card, and that was their middle of the road card. And then they had 40% faster, and then maybe 10% faster as their top end SKU. So do you think that because we're being upsold, the cards that were actually being sold for the $250 to $300 class of card, do you think that what's going to happen eventually is we're going to have a regression in resolution? You know, the way, like, it used to be like, this card will play 1080p, this card will play 1080p, this card will play 1080p. And then with the RX 480, it started to become, this card will play 1080p and maybe get you 60 frames per second in 1440p.
Right.
But, like, you know, just in the year that it was launched, and then, you know, things caught up again. Do you think that games are just going to get, like, especially with the new consoles coming out, do you think things are going to, like, games are going to start to require a lot more horsepower to drive it back, and you're going to actually need a 400 quid class card now just to keep up with that?
Well, if you notice what they're talking about with games, you know, the actual games themselves and game developers, what they're trying to do is they're trying to pull out every trick in the book to lower visual fidelity. That's what, you know, was it variable rate shading?
Variable rate shading, yeah. That's on Turing, yeah.
Yeah, so make your image look worse, but you won't notice. You know, temporal anti-aliasing kind of does that too. It blurs the image, but, you know, most of the time you don't really notice. So what they're doing is they're trying to achieve the higher resolutions with less hardware by lowering the image quality in smart ways, instead of the old school way of just give me more horsepower and push through, which was, you know, the way that things have always been done on the PC side anyway. And you still can. I mean, you can still buy $1,000 graphics cards to do that, but most people don't do that. As we just went over, the X70 class, and I guess probably the 5700-ish class from AMD is going to be kind of where most people stop. That's kind of the high end for most people. And yeah, they're just going to try and extract as much horsepower out of that. Now, as far as resolution goes, I think most developers realize 4K is it. No PC gamer is going to have, like a 24-inch, like 8K display. There's no reason for it. You literally will not be able to see the difference between 8K, 20K, 1000K, a billion K, or 4K. The screen's too small. So it just doesn't really matter for the average PC gamer. And then in the living room, 4K TVs, you're 10, 15 feet away from the thing. Same sort of thing. 8K, I don't think's ever going to catch on because it's unnecessary. Your eyes just can't make out the difference. I can barely see the difference between 1080p and 4K in a living room. So, resolution's not really the problem anymore. It's just getting that stable frame rate. And I think they're just trying to maximize the current resolutions that most people use with the hardware by, like I said, making the images worse in certain areas, but then looking a lot nicer in others, more realistic.
Yeah, but like for me, I've something to say on resolution. I think 1440p at 32 inches is about where it's perfect for normal sitting at a desk. So I have a 32-inch monitor, 1440p.
I had one. I just sold mine, but yeah, I had one.
Yeah. I think that's perfect resolution, and I think if I got a 32-inch with 4K, I couldn't tell, other than the icons get smaller. I wouldn't be able to tell you. Now, I could look closely and see the pixels, absolutely, but at normal sitting distance, I can't. But what I will say in the living room, I think if you're going to make TVs bigger, resolution has to go up. But, it only has to, 4K is good enough for a 65-inch TV. Right. It's only if you're like 120-inch TV, then you probably need 8K. But like that's just because you're making those pixels bigger. So shrinking the pixels makes sense.
And at that size, I mean, you could seriously make the argument that a 4K projector would just be smarter anyway. I mean, now not so much for gaming, but if you're on 110 inches, you're kind of on that fringe, and you have the room and the space and the money. You can kind of do whatever you want. So yeah, I agree. If you start getting that big, you might need something. But
the issue is though that for 1440p, like I bought a 1440p. Because you heard what happened to my fancy monitor, my $800 monitor. Did you hear what happened to that? Yeah. So I had to replace it because I just couldn't use a 1080p monitor. I was going mad, and I needed so I got 120 hertz AOC display, right? 1440p FreeSync for £120, which is about $150.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. Was it secondhand?
No, brand new on Amazon. I don't know. It was like over Christmas sort of sale or something. It was £235, reduced down to 120 or 30 pounds. I was like, what? Give me that. Thank you very much. Yeah, and it is amazing. But like, if monitors are getting that cheap, 1440p monitors are cheap, well then, and they're 32-inch 1440p, you're gonna want something to drive that. And I find my 5700 XT is perfect to drive that. It's perfect. It will do most games above 100 frames per second. The really, really taxing games, if you put everything on, it'll do about 70 to 80 frames per second. Which is fine. That means I'm good to go for about another year or two. But for me, if those monitors are getting like cheap like that, like realistically, that monitor price would justify a 200 quid card. You'd be like, well, I can get a 200 quid card and upgrade my monitor as well. But you'll find that I had a 5500 XT. I sold it, right? But it for the most part on esports titles and everything, it was fine. Drove the 120 hertz, everything fine. But you try and play a better, and you're talking about in some cases 30 frames per second at 1440p, which is crazy to think. You know what I mean? Those games where I'm getting 70 on the 5700 XT, I'm getting 35 on the RX 5500 XT.
Which I mean makes sense. It's basically half of a 5700 XT, so
yeah.
Half the frame rate kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So, and I have a 1080p monitor here, so like my final video on T will be talking experience with it, how I felt, what resolution she could run with it and stuff like that. And I have a 1080p monitor, so I ran it with the 1080p monitor, and it was a world's difference. It was absolutely fun. It was like exactly the same experience I'm having now with my 5700 XT. on the
Well,
1080p. It's fine.
and I also think that's the reason why lower resolutions, like 1080p, I don't think's ever going to go away. Even if 1440p monitors get super cheap, it'll take GPUs getting to that level, basically 5700 XT performance relative to the games at the time. That would need to be like a $150 card. But most people are just going to stick to lower resolutions because, number one, they're good enough. They're easy to drive. That's something that, I'm starting to notice for myself is, 1080p 60, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't do that anymore. It's like, yeah, but you can drive that on just about anything. Think of how small a computer you can have. You can have something that you just throw in your backpack and take with you, and that's not going to be, taking up a lot of space. There's a lot of benefits to limiting your resolution and frame rate targets to something a little bit more reasonable. And I think a lot of people out there kind of do that. They're like, yeah, this is good enough, and they just don't upgrade their monitors and stuff because they last forever. My monitors like never die unless I get like a power surge.
Yeah. My monitor, the monitor I had was overkill. I'll happily say it was overkill. I was leaving a job in a hospital, and I had share options in the hospital, and I got a lot of money. And
yourself.
Yeah, so I treated myself to my ultimate PC. I've never had the best of the best of the best of the best, and I treated myself to the best of everything. That within reason, and I had a YouTube channel, so it would have made a nice video. So that's what I did it for. And since then, I've subsequently downgraded my system because there was no need for all the hardware. You know what I mean? Like, I lost maybe £100 on my motherboard and CPU. I lost maybe £100 on my Radeon VII. But I replaced it with stuff that makes sense for me. The only thing I couldn't change, and I made a video about this, right? I made a video. It's my most popular video. Is don't buy a 144 hertz monitor because just sitting reading text on, scrolling through text on the internet actually hurts your eyes when you're so used to 144 hertz.
Yeah. Well, it's true. You do kind of get used to it. And it depends on the type of games that you play. Like 144 hertz Witcher 3 versus 60 hertz Witcher 3. For me, I can't really tell the difference. But now if it's like Doom, yeah, you can definitely tell the difference. Depends on the speed of the game for me. But I've also noticed if you just stop playing games, like just go watch TV or leave the house, for like a couple of weeks and then go back to 60 hertz, you can do it. It's one of those, you have to just get away from it for a little while and your eyes will adjust. And it's actually something that I've been messing around with is old school CRTs, which that'd probably be the next video. If you ever want to play with this, is don't ever buy a CRT because it's really hard going back. I've been messing around with my old TV downstairs, and the image quality and just everything is so much better than LCD, but it's super low res. We're talking 480i, so it's only 240 lines being displayed at a time, but it looks so much better than on an LCD in like 720p or 1080p. It's crazy. So it's just one of those things, like your eyes can adjust to certain things if other things are better. So
I have a friend who has three, is it 19-inch or 22-inch CRT monitors? And they're like, I think they're like 1600 by 1200 or something mad. But he has them in like Infinity.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. He properly has them. Like, this is what he does. He loves this stuff. He plays simulators and shit. But like, it is, the color is so good. The refresh rate, I don't know what the story is with the refresh, but it doesn't matter. It could be run at 60. It looks better than 60 on a LCD panel. It's just everything looks better. Like, and you remember in your mind, you remember these games, like these old games that you used to play on, you play Sonic or whatever on the old TV. Like, you remember that looking way better. And then you see him load up an emulator on his CRT, and you're like, it just looks the same as what I remember, but it doesn't look the same on my PC. It's crazy.
Yeah, it looks so much different. And the biggest thing that I noticed, because I hooked up a Wii, a Xbox 360, and a PS3, because those are kind of like the best consoles that had the analog output. And I don't know if you ever played Killzone 2 on the PS3. But
I did, for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, the input delay is so terrible. It's literally the worst first-person shooter that I've ever played in terms of input delay. but I played it on the CRT downstairs, and because there's no input delay, it's not 1 millisecond, it's not 4 milliseconds, it's 0 milliseconds. So it's technically infinitely better than any LCD. And it actually was much more playable. And I was like, that's like a bonus on top of it, is you have no input delay. And as far as like refresh and resolution goes, you could basically do half and half. So 720p on a CRT will look a lot like 1080p on an LCD. And then 60 hertz will actually look and feel more like 120 hertz. So basically you need like 1/4 the horsepower on a CRT. Now, granted, the technology is way worse for like video editing and still pictures and stuff like that.
The environment.
Yeah.
You cannot, you could like since we started talking about, you can give away a CRT, but before then you could not give away a CRT. You couldn't get rid of it, and nobody would take it off your hands because it's so toxic.
What was that? Well, it's because if you take it to a recycling center here, they charge you to get rid of them now. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why people will give them away. But yeah, nowadays they're premium, because when it comes to gaming, there is no better monitor technology. Now, for everything else you use your computer for, LCD is better. That's why I'm really hoping they just come out with a new monitor technology that combines the best of both worlds, or some sort of effect, because LCDs are actually, in my opinion, one of the reasons why we need such high frame rate and high resolution, is because the technology is just junk. And now that I'm going back and testing it myself, it's like, yeah, for games, it might be a good idea to pick up a cheapo CRT and play your games on that and do everything else on an LCD. But that's my opinion.
We have the technology. It's called OLED. Like, it's not as good as CRT, but
OLED is still LCD. It's still LCD based technology. It's just the lighting in the back is different.
Yeah, well, the lighting and the pixel response time is so much better. Everything's just better. I think OLED is good enough. It just needs to get cheaper and get into monitors.
We'll see. OLED, to me, it's still an evolution. I think we need like a completely different technology.
Yeah. Tom swears by it.
Well, I mean, you know, it's one of those. Everybody's gonna have different opinions on this, of course.
Yeah, I can only say it for my phone. The only OLED screen I've ever used is on phones. I've never had one, so I don't know.
I've only seen them in like stores and stuff, and I've messed around with them there. And then I've had the PS Vita. You know, that actually had an OLED, the original. And that was
yeah. I have one of those. I have one of those with all the emulators.
Yeah, those are pretty cool. Yeah. All right, so we kind of rambled on there. I don't know how we really got onto that particular topic. I'm just so impressed. I'm going to start doing some videos on that stuff. I'm setting up my basement as kind of like a retro center. Have all that stuff going. But CES just wrapped up, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. How do you feel? I was kind of like, you know, just is what it is type of a thing. But how do you feel?
Yeah, like, we look forward to CES. I made a tweet, and the tweet was literally like, CES is my Christmas, especially as a tech tuber, because it gives you content, like, it gets you views. You want CES to be exciting, because that will get you more views if there's something exciting to talk about. It was what was it? AMD are going to bring it to Intel in the laptop space. There's now a cheap graphics card. Well, cheapish graphics card from AMD. I think 80 quid, 280 quid is fine for that graphics card.
In this market, let's preface that proper.
Yeah, in this market. So don't jump on. In a vacuum, it's fine. But the world is not vacuous, and we have all this history to remind us what we used to get. So therefore, it is not fine. But it's fine in this market. Except for, did you see the rumor that not even true, the EVGA are launching a 2060 for like 280 quid?
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention that because I saw you did a video on it, and then I found out that that's an EVGA exclusive thing. Yeah. That's not an Nvidia tier graphics card.
Yeah, but in that video I do say that, and I do preface it with saying, wouldn't it be cool if this was going to happen with everybody?
Right, but what does that say? I mean, the 1660 Super made the 1660 Ti redundant. So basically that card needed to go away. And this is EVGA saying that you need a graphics card here. Basically, you have an AIB telling Nvidia you need to properly space out your products. And I find that very amusing.
Yeah, I think Nvidia are going to do that. I think going on it, because Nvidia always have something. Wait until a week before these reviews hit, man. It's the 12th now. I don't know what day this video will go live. As we're speaking, it's the 12th. So wait until we see, like, a week beforehand. Reviewers could be re-reviewing their RTX 2060s and saying, "Oh, Nvidia have dropped the price on them." I don't know. I think it'd be a very smart move from Nvidia, and we know that that was where they should have been priced. So they could definitely sell them for that price. And if they do, I don't think it's going to beat an RX 5600 XT. It's probably going to be much of a push because this one is a reduced clock, 2060.
Yeah, it just depends on how they lock it down, I think, because Turing's going to hit 1900, 2 gigahertz pretty much anyway, even with a hampered cooler. So
yeah, they'll just power limit them. You probably flash the bias, whatever, but like they'll just power limit them. That's what they do. Like that's what they did with the 2080 Ti, so beat the Titan RTX. So they could do that. But back to what I thought about CES, like, yeah, the grand, decent graphics card for half decent price. And then like so that, but did you not find like it weird? Like they went 1080p. You've got the RX 5500 for high-end 1080p. Now you've got the RX 5600 XT, and for 1440p, you've got 5700 and 5700 XT. And I was like, and now, but that never happened.
Right.
And we knew it wasn't going to happen. We knew well before CES.
Oh yeah, I was not expecting it. I went into there knowing that wasn't happening.
Yeah, but it was left out. Like it was like a crumb. There will be something to come. It was like I like that. I think AMD knew what they were doing when they were doing that. But yeah, so that then Intel did literally nothing. They held a press event for their investors and overshot it, and then had 15 minutes to talk about all the cool stuff they're doing at laptops. And it was actually interesting, the stuff they had to do on laptops, but they couldn't actually show it off because their CEO had gone on for too long. Yeah, and DG1 was there, but DG1 is just a flop of a graphics card.
It's a prototype that, yeah, if they're this far behind on it, I doubt it's going to launch this year.
Yeah. And then what was it like? Nvidia launched some Nvidia certified FreeSync monitors.
Well, Nvidia didn't even show up. They just put out some drivers, and then they're going to 360 hertz. Woohoo!
Right.
So now you need even more powerful CPUs to push even more powerful and expensive monitors, because the technology is the problem, not anything else. But I digress. I'm just getting really sick and tired of, hey, spend more money to overcome the limitation of monitor technology. It's such a waste of money.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, so hopefully somebody fixes that. But they probably won't, because it's more lucrative for them to keep things where they are. But yeah, that's kind of what CES was. Outside of the AMD mobile stuff, I found none of it interesting or exciting. I was like, okay, the APU stuff is really, really cool. I've been waiting for 8-core 16-thread APUs for pretty much since Zen popped. I'm like, they can do this. Because I think for the average person, that's going to be all the horsepower your average person's going to need. And gamers, I mean, once they can get that memory bottleneck fixed, once we can get some on-die DRAM or something, I think APUs are really going to take off, because if you look at what they're putting into this Xbox One X, that is crazy. Just imagine if they sold those for like $299, an APU like that. Nobody's going to need much anything other than that. That's all anybody's going to really need for 1080p or 1440p.
Yep. Imagine if they got the Xbox silicon, and they got it down to the size of the silicon in their current laptop. Do you know that laptop die is like 151 millimeter squared or whatever? The new laptop, the 4800H or whatever, or U or whatever it's called.
I thought it was 200 millimeter squared.
I don't know, whatever. Yeah, it's really small. It's not like large. I think it's much smaller than So don't quote me. I could be wrong. I thought it was 151 millimeters squared. Could be completely wrong on that. But it's under the size of Navi, and they've got 8 cores and a bit of graphics in there. Imagine if they could get, like, they could, because they're going to 5 nanometers soon. Yeah. 7 nanometer AV already brings you 20% down. So imagine getting that 400 millimeter die size down to 200 and something millimeters squared, and then being able to sell it to people for like 300 quid. And you've got your graphics and CPU solution.
Yep. If you want to upgrade your computer, just buy a new chip, pop it in, you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're gaming with a 5700 XT faster than a 5700 XT.
You're basically gaming with a 5800 XT if they make one.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to make one?
I don't know. I mean, Red Gaming Tech just had a video today about RDNA 2's energy efficiency. I didn't get to watch it before we started talking, but that's the biggest thing that everybody said to me about RDNA 2 is it's much more energy efficient. And I think that they might just wait for that, because if the energy efficiency is so much higher, you could see something with the same power draw as a 5700 XT, but being 30 to 50% faster. It just depends on how good it is. Now, that could all just be speculation and rumor, but I'm thinking RDNA 2 isn't as energy efficient because of the size of the Xbox. I thought it was going to be, a regular console-sized console. But because of its weird design and shape, I think RDNA 2 isn't going to be as energy efficient as people might think. So I don't know. We'll see something towards the end of this year. I think you were actually right on that one with the big Navi. I think that they will come out with a small RDNA 2 card to test the waters, kind of like a pipe cleaner. Yeah, probably in the middle of this year. Maybe like a 5600 non-XT or something kind of small, and just see how it does. And then, yeah, we'll probably get one later on this year. Later this year will be, obviously, new consoles. I'm thinking Q2 announcement for the new Nvidia cards with Q3, Q4 launch. And then AMD's cards will probably be right around the same time frame.
Yeah, what tells me that rumor about RDNA... RDNA 2. We don't know whether it's RDNA 2 or RDNA 1 in the consoles, right? We don't know. But we know it's going to have ray tracing. So is it going to be on the silicon, or is it going to be an ASIC? We don't know. So I'm not going to speculate on that. But what I will say is, if it's RDNA 2, I don't think they've done much to the power efficiency, because they're running it at 1700 megahertz. And if you've played with a 5700. If you run Navi at 1700 megahertz, you can drop the voltage by a lot. And you've got a card suddenly that could be run on a 6-pin rather than an 8 and a 6. And that's, I swear to God, you can do that with a 57. You can actually make a 5500 XT. If you drop the clocks by 300 megahertz, you make a 5500 XT run off the PCI Express power.
Which I'm surprised, to me, I'm really surprised that they didn't do that anyway, because that card needed to be powerless, but continue.
Yeah, but like the reason why they didn't do that, and this is a problem with AMD all the time, is they're late. If they were first to the market, they could pump that marketing out and whatever, and say to you, look, you could there would have been room on the table to overclock these cards, right? Like Nvidia always overclock. The problem is they're late, so they have to beat a targeted card. So they had to beat the 2070, so they had to run Navi a bit higher than they wanted to, and they had to beat a 1650 Super, so they had to run the 5500 XT faster than they wanted to. So this is the problem with those cards, is that they're running it at higher voltages.
Well, what I've noticed with AMD is they push their silicon to the absolute max. I mean, they do it to their CPUs, and with GPUs especially, because the thermal headroom, GPUs could run at 80, 90 degrees Celsius at all times and still be fine technically. Nobody wants to do that, but they can. So AMD literally pushes those things to the bleeding edge to basically maximize the profit, because if it's 10% faster, it might jump it up to another tier, and then they can charge more money for it. What Nvidia does, and you've mentioned this on your channel, is they pick a TDP, and Nvidia and AMD's TDP ratings are completely different. Nvidia uses TDP as that's how much power the unit draws. So it's not the TDP. Their TDPs are actually higher than what the TDP really is. And I think Nvidia does that because it forces manufacturers to put bigger coolers on lower TDP chips. And then that gives you overclocking headroom. Whereas AMD pushes it to the absolute limit. And for example, like the 150 watt TDP on an RX 580, the thing draws 200 to 220 watts of power. So a 150 watt cooler is like just good enough. Whereas like 150 watt 1070 probably is a 120 watt TDP card with a better cooler, so therefore it can push harder. So that's the big difference, is Nvidia leaves a lot of performance on the table, and AMD pushes theirs to the limit. And that's where the big difference there comes in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, but they're also first as well, so they can set the performance tier and the price tier. And when you can do that, there's no need to push your silicon to the absolute limit because you're setting the performance and price tier.
Sure.
Yeah. So if AMD, let's say, was first with 5700 XT, and they were like, here's our 5700 XT running at 1700 megahertz with a shitty cooler. It doesn't matter. It's a shitty cooler because it's going to stay cool at 1.1 volts rather than the shitty 1.25 volts they've got it running at. So it'll be fine. And then all the reviewers will overclock it and say, look, it overclocks like a dream. It overclocks like a boss. And then even if Nvidia come out with a card that slightly beats it, well, then you release the new gigahertz edition and you overclock it. And you've done nothing to it other than hire the voltage out of the factory and charge 50 quid more. And people will be like, oh, that's amazing. But because they're late, they don't get to set the performance or price tier. I think it's another reason to it, you know?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. They're more boxed in. The price to performance tiers are already in place.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks AMD kind of likes it that way, because then this way it's not really like guesswork. They just go, okay, this is what they got, this is what we got, just charge this much. If you think about it, it does make life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it does. But at the same time, it also leaves you scrambling when Nvidia still have things on the table to play, and you release your card thinking, oh, look, 450 quid. This is a great price for a card that's competing with a 600 quid card and beating it. And then you have to go, well, we debated you all and drop the price by 50 quid. You didn't, you're fuck. You just got surprised by a card that you didn't know existed. And that's what happened. And so you had to take a little bit of a loss in your profit. But that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And I think with these like large Navi rumors going around, I think they're all bollocks. Genuinely, like, you have to talk about them because you want views. But I really believe. Sorry for swearing on your channel, by the way, Chris.
No, it's okay. I mean, I swear when it's necessary.
Yeah. Well, I'm Irish. We swear when it's not necessary as well.
Well, you're Irish. It's always necessary.
Yeah. We use it as punctuation. But I think they're all made up. That double die, I think it's a complete and utter fallacy. I think probably what you'll see from Navi, can they double it? Yes, they could. Would it be a power hog? Absolutely. Would it need to use HBM? 100%. Like, anybody thinks it doesn't need to use it.
That's the big one. Yeah, because if you double it, you either need a 512-bit bus or HBM. It's one of the two, and a 512-bit memory bus is going to chew so much power. And room on the PCB. And there's a spec on DDR6 that the traces need to be a certain length, so you can't even do a 512-bit bus on that die, on that card. So that's impossible. So yes, could it be possible? Absolutely. Will it have to use? Absolutely. But I think it makes much more sense to release a 350 square millimeter die with 60 or 64 compute units, which will compete with a 2080 Ti. The problem is, doesn't matter when they launch it, Ampere's around the corner, and you're once again too late, AMD. So you're either going to have to price this card appropriately or just not launch it. Yeah, and that's kind of the sticky conundrum that they're in, is what to do, because obviously they have a big Navi. I mean, that's what's going to be in the Xbox One Series X or Xbox Series X, whatever. If it's 12 teraflops, I mean, that's the 50% that we talked about that months ago. That they could have done that. But yeah, if you're any more than about 6 months behind your competitor, if you want to be competitive, and that's the real thing. And we were talking about that the other day, and I think we'll jump into that next. But if you want to compete, you need to skip to your next product and bring it forward about a year. So no matter what it costs, no matter what the cost is, you have to do it if you want to really compete. So they would need to come out with like RDNA 2 right now, really, is what they would need to do. But I don't think AMD really wants to compete. Like I said, I think they're pretty comfortable where they're at. They're really pushing the APU side of things, which is smart because I think Nvidia has only got maybe another 5 to 10 years in them as this big company. They'll still be around, but I don't think that they're going to matter in about 10 years because the APUs and consoles that AMD's dominating in, that's really all they seem to care about, and everything else is just some sort of derivative of that. Is that kind of how you feel about it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I've been waiting for something funny to happen, and people don't think this is going to happen, but it could absolutely 100% happen. Nvidia could lap AMD. What I mean by lap is that they could be a complete, like they were almost a complete generation ahead. It only takes another year or two for them to completely lap them, but it doesn't matter because Nvidia's entire stock price is based on this fallacy that these guys are going to be the next company to make the AI revolution possible. And like, that's a fallacy. Nobody knows what is going to make the AI revolution possible. Google's tensor cores are better than Nvidia's. ASICs are doing a better job at inference and number crunching. So one day we're going to decide on a code that's going to make AI amazing, right? And they're going to write it down, and it's going to be script that just starts to write itself and become sentient and blow us all up or whatever, right? That's going to happen. Well, but when that happens,
yeah, within 5 years they're expecting that. So
yeah,
not very.
So when that happens, whoever's making the hardware that drives that is going to make a fortune, and that's why Nvidia stock price is crazy high. But like, that's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna be fixed function. I don't think it's gonna be programmable shaders. I don't think that's the way the world works, and I don't think that's. I could be wrong. You could be wrong. Everybody could be wrong. But sure. I don't see it. And you know, the fact that AMD has its hand in 2 pies instead of 1 pie keeps them safe from that collapse. And it could happen that Nvidia just has to go back to selling graphics cards to gamers. And all of a sudden, AMD has chewed up all that market with their APU. And what are you going to do then? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's the really dangerous thing is because it's not just AMD, because Intel will be doing it too. So you're going to actually already have competition. You will have a whole nother market for pretty much your sub $400 gamers, which you and I would definitely say is the vast majority of PC gamers. Yep. And Nvidia is going to be charging you, what, $400 for maybe 20% more performance, but you also get a CPU from Intel and AMD. So it's like, how are they going to compete with that? They're just going to have to go more expensive and bigger and still maintain performance lead. They'll still need to have the best graphics cards because AMD and Intel will still make discrete graphics cards for the markets that want to pay for it. But, you know, the main market's going to go to that sub $400 APU. You know, you slap it in and you're done gamer.
Yeah, they're going to become record player manufacturers, if you know what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. Like like or CD or whatever. They're going to become those because yes, the audiophiles listen to those and they think it's amazing. But for everyone else, MP3s did the job. Do you know what I mean? And then streaming services took over. But like with GPUs, I think what we've never got and what will take off is the first person to make a box that's 500 quid, that plays every game, that's upgradable, and it's just 500 quid, and it's a PC of any description. They will be the winner. So, but it will have to be a big company, whether it's Google, whether it's Xbox, whether it's PlayStation, whoever it is. And I think Xbox are probably in pole position to do it because they own the gaming operating system. And people might not like that because people might say Linux is amazing. Windows is the gaming operating system. And all it takes is Microsoft to flip that switch and turn Xbox Windows into proper Windows, and you're buying a box for 500 quid that plays every game out there.
Oh yeah,
I don't see.
If Microsoft was smart, and they might do this with the Series X, but yeah, if there was like a toggle mode that turns your Xbox into a full-blown computer, that's all anybody's gonna buy, just like what you're talking about, because there's literally no reason for anything else. And if it plays your Steam games, and just like a regular computer, but then you still have access to all your Xbox games. And then what's even more insidious about Microsoft, I think they are in the pole position, is their Games Pass. You get 200 something games for $15 a month.
Oh man, I hate that because I love it.
Well, we all knew somebody was going to do it. We're all like, you look at Netflix and then you look at the gaming market and you're like, you could do the same thing and that would be really smart. And then Microsoft just happens to be the first one to do it. Yeah. And then the crazy thing is like with Google Stadia, I think they're going to give you xCloud for free if you have Game Pass. So that's just going to kill Stadia outright. And with the Game Pass, you also get the Xbox Live. So it's like $15 a month and you get everything. So yeah, if they gave you a full functional PC for $500, $600, somewhere in there, and then you also got all the games that you really want to play, or most of them or whatever, for $15 a month, and that's it, and that's all you really ever have to pay, and you got your old Steam library and GOG and everything else, and it all works, I think it's game over, just like how you said.
And you can browse the internet, check your emails, talk to your friends on Discord, all of these things. You can do it on your PC, and it's just Microsoft are selling it to you. And you know what? If Microsoft are clever, as Tom says, sell you little cards that you can slot in yourself every year, 2 years.
They don't even need to do that. They'll just come out with an upgraded model, and if you want it, you buy it. And, everything's in the cloud now. Xbox saves all your shit anyway. You just buy a new box, plug it in, and all your stuff will reload, and there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very smart. And for anybody who doesn't believe that, I still think that 500 quid is very, very cheap for the hardware that's going to be in it. But when you think about the smartphone and what the smartphone, there was a time when people had an MP3 player, a camera, a phone, an internet surfing device, and they like a laptop, whatever. Now you don't need any of that. You just got it all in one. And yeah, it might be £1,000, but all of those other items. Laptop. Yeah, all of those other items were. So if you think this is not going to happen, like, you are out of your fucking mind, because it's going to happen. And it's going to happen soon. And I think this is what you were hinting at on your video, saying something big is coming.
Well, that's part of it, I think, is just the fact that we're going to get so much more horsepower in such cheap packages that we're getting to the point where the average person doesn't need it. Most people don't need 8-core 16-thread CPUs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we're getting to the point where only the extreme enthusiasts and professionals are really going to need even the top end of mainstream. Like, we've gone so far beyond the average person now, who's probably still good with like a 2-core 4-thread CPU for average daily tasks, that it's just going to get exponentially bigger. When we have 128 core mainstream CPUs and let's say 1024 server CPUs, I mean, who the hell needs any of that? I mean, software is the problem. Software is so slow to catch up that hardware is just going to go through the moon, and it's going to take years for software to catch up.
Yeah, because I think we need x86 needs to be scratched, go to a new type of operating system. I don't know what we're going to go to. Definitely, with the amount of CPU cores happening, you're going to hit the limit that Windows can address CPU cores. That's going to happen, and yeah, it's bananas. And like, everybody who says, "What do you need a 64 core Threadripper for?" You don't. But you need to look at that and realize that in 4 or 5 years, if you were somebody who bought an R7 3700X, that might be the CPU you're looking at. Like, it genuinely might be. because that could happen. That's what happens when you bring this amount of cores. You keep driving more cores. Your competition drives more. Then the prices have to come down, and that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it will if they keep going that way. I think the IPC war is going to be the next one, especially with 3D stacking. I think the core war, I think AMD has won. They just need to wait for Intel to catch up. Now, they might keep pushing it, but like I said, with the 3D stacking, I'm expecting anywhere from 100% IPC gains to 10,000% IPC gains within 5 years. So basically making our current PCs look like pen and paper and just being on a whole nother level that we can't even think of. But if you, let's say that does happen, the software that we use then is not going to be much different than the software we use now. And that's the limitation isn't the hardware. It's just software and software developers. They just won't be able to keep up with that.
But I think a good thing for software developers is that it was really easy to program for a really long pipeline. It was just really easy because you get your assets, you line them up, and then you get them executed one after the other. That was fine. It's really easy to understand, and that's why software was written for. Now, the problem is that you will reach a point where you can't do that anymore. It just doesn't work. So CPU manufacturers have caught on to this first already. They know that you're not going to get faster 5 gigahertz. 5 gigahertz is probably the limit, realistically. We might get to 6 gigahertz, but like 5 gigahertz is probably the limit. So you have to make your CPUs do more work in the same amount of time, same amount of cycles. So how do you do that? You make your assembly line wider rather than longer, and that's fine. That's great. It's wonderful. But as soon as software developers have to find a way to get more, maybe they'll begin to program for wider cores. That's the only thing. Not more cores, but maybe wider cores, which is it might be halfway.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they'll catch up eventually, but like I said, imagine if PC technology, one generation to the next, let's say Zen 4 to Zen 5, it's 10-fold increase, 10-fold across the board. Software developers aren't going to have a clue what to do with that at first. It's going to take them years to figure that out. So, but think of a world where there's so much processing power that software developers can do literally whatever they want. And it doesn't matter that the machines can just run it. It's like, this is the worst optimized code ever, and it just works. Yeah.
Yeah. For anybody who looks at this and says, "Well, what are you talking?" I'm sitting here talking on Discord, recording on OBS, and my CPU is drawing 4% or 5% or whatever of its total. It's doing essentially nothing. So we've already reached a point where, like, even if you're gaming, you could, and I'm only using an 8 core. I remember we can get consumer 16 core, where your CPU, you can't really max it out unless you're doing millions of things at once on your PC. Like, the only thing that really maxes out now is rendering or something.
Yeah, or really poor optimized single thread code. And that's
yeah. So like, and that's just now. And if you want to take how far we've come, like, people might say that. Well, look at Zen 1. Zen 1 was 8 cores, and it was roughly about 30% slower each core than the generation we're already on now. And that was only 2017. But not only are we doing that, not only are we 30%, we're 100% faster. In fact, now it's more expensive, but we're 100% faster because we've got double the amount of cores.
More than that, if you add in the clock speed increases, probably closer to 150%.
That's what I was about to say. But then you have to add in clock speed and IPC on top of that. So you're more like 100. That's in what, 3 years?
2 years.
3 years? 2 years. 2 years that happened. So that's just 2 years. So double that, because that's what'll happen in 2 years again. Double it again. Like, it's going to be like, they're already talking about Zen 3 having 17% IPC.
And that's lowballing it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe 200 megahertz clock speed as well. So, that's 17% on Zen 2. It's not Zen 1. So if you compare that to how much faster it is than Zen 1, and Zen 1's still fine. If you can get a Zen 1, if you can get an 8 core Zen for 100 quid, man, buy that stuff. That's really good. That's really well worth it for a gaming CPU. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And then, you figure we're probably going to have twice that with Zen 3, 200%, maybe even more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I figure IPC, the big thing that is leading me to think it's going to be a lot bigger than people think is, I think Tom was right, and they were going to do the SMT 3 or 4, but they realized they didn't need it because I think the IPC gain was enough. So they could hold off on the, hyper threading for maybe Zen 4 or 5 or something and use that to help jump that. But Jim posted a video where I think it was Forrest Norrod said that expect a generational leap. Now, a generational leap from a new architecture, he was saying that Zen to Zen 2, skipping Zen Plus, was not a generational leap. So going from Zen to Zen 2, Zen 3 is going to be bigger than that, going from Zen 2 to Zen 3. And that was what, 20, 30%, you'd say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably about 20%. So I would say at least 30% IPC.
Yeah. And in things like AVX workloads, it can be up to, so you're looking at unbelievable. Like, we're in the days of Starburst, what was it called? NetBurst, like single core Pentium 4s. This is the start of it. When AMD launched their dual core processor and everybody went and shocked the world, and everybody went, oh my God. Like, this is the start of that. And it's got to maybe be another 10 years of just crazy launches and crazy stuff. And just nobody can predict it. And
I think the hard part for a lot of PC gamers to wrap their heads around is because things have been stagnant for so long and prices have just kind of shot through the moon, that when people tell them, the next 10 years is going to be like more technology is going to, or it's going to outpace like the last, 10,000 years of human existence in the next 10 years. And it's going to be unrecognizable. Like, their brains just can't fathom it because they're like, they just can't go there. It's like, well, why would they do that? These companies want to make all this money. It's because if, let's say, AMD doesn't do it, there's going to be another company. Samsung will make CPUs. If they're like, I can make something 10 times stronger than you and it costs us nothing, somebody else will step in. That's the point. There's enough big tech companies out there fighting for money that you don't really see on a day-to-day basis. We just think that there's 3, but there's plenty of companies out there that could be dangerous if they wanted to be.
Yep. There's Chinese manufacturers CPUs starting up. I can't remember her name. There's loads of people entering the arena all the time, not to mention that ARM is knocking on the desktop door and the laptop door. So AMD have to stay ahead of the curve. They have to keep innovating. And, all it takes is one of those ARM companies to invent a new ARM CPU that can do what Epic does on server better than AMD can. And then AMD are out of business. So they have to keep innovating.
Yep. Look at Intel. I mean, they went from untouchable to laughingstock of the industry within just a couple of years. I mean, same thing can happen to any of these companies at any time because the world's always going to demand the best and they're going to want the most efficient. And that's just the way things go. So yeah, I'm very excited for the future. It's one of those, like, when people really start like hunkering down on what we have now and start arguing about like 5-10% differences, I'm like, it's meaningless. What you're arguing about is just doesn't matter. That's why, like I said, this entire generation of graphics cards, if you have a Polaris or Pascal GPU or newer, this is a pass. It's just not good enough, in my opinion, for anybody to upgrade. But next generation, I expect Nvidia to launch something that will remind you of Pascal. I'm expecting massive gains at, I guess, maybe today's reasonable prices, or maybe they'll do like with Maxwell and bring prices back down a little bit. Who knows? But I'm expecting big gains next generation. It's just the price is the question mark.
Yeah, well, I was sat down with a calculator, and I love messing with a calculator because calculator is just a funny way to work out some back of the envelope math. And like, you could take the 2080 Ti, you could have it down to, like, without doing anything to the architecture, you could take a 2080 Ti, have it down to about 450 millimeters squared, which is, for Nvidia, that's a small die. That's like, Nvidia makes big dies. That's what they do. So 450 millimeters squared, they could have that thing, and they could, with the power savings, increase clock speed or whatever they're going to do with it, because Nvidia probably will get a clock speed advantage from this because they're very good with their transistors. So increase clock speed, unlock the memory bus, use HBM finally, or whatever they want to do. Use faster memory. You could look at just with the 2080 Ti doing nothing, not any. You could get 30% extra out of it, and it could be 450 millimeters squared. So, like, you could only imagine what they could do with 550 millimeters squared, 600 millimeters squared, or increasing the IPC of the actual architecture, which I don't think they're going to do this time around. I'm very much like you. I think this is going to be a Pascal generation where they increase clock speed, efficiency, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're just going to tweak what they got and squeeze more out of it. That's what I think.
They might increase its ray tracing performance.
I think they might actually get rid of some of it.
Really?
Yeah, I think what they're going to do is they're going to evaluate the games that use ray tracing. I think I was talking to Cortex, and he told me that none of the RTX games, either most of them don't use the RT cores or they don't use the tensor cores or something. Like, they don't use a good chunk of that stuff. So they might just get rid of it and save the space on the gaming cards. And now it really comes down to what they want to do, because like you started off the video saying, for their professional market, they need more of that stuff. Gaming needs less. So it just depends which way Nvidia wants to go. If they want to sell the cut down professional stuff, or if they actually want to make gaming cards. But if they make gaming cards, I think they'll cut a lot of that stuff out. I was saying that if I don't know how you read into things or look at Nvidia's architectures, but I'm a geek when it comes to stuff. I love reading about it. And what they did is they took their SM and they reduced the shader count to 64, and they put 64 inch shaders inside. Mm-hmm. That stuff can do the that can do the standard stuff that you'd need with gaming now that the tensor core handles. The tensor core is used for denoising. And as far as I know, the inch shader can take the place of not as well, but it can take the place of a denoiser, or it can take the place of the RT cores. One or the other. I can't remember which one it is. So yeah, you could remove the RT, or I would imagine. That's just from something I read somewhere. I can't remember where I read it from. But people tend to think that Turing is not a massive redesign from Pascal, which is crazy to me, because they've completely redesigned how the shit works. Like the SM, it's completely different.
Yeah, completely. Like, they've kept the shader count the same inside, but 50% of them do int and 50% of them do, standard FP32.
Yeah, well, and that could be something that maybe they can fix to shrink it down, is instead of having two different cores doing two different maths, they might be able to come up with something like what AMD does, whereas the same core can basically do FP16, 32, or 64, depending on whatever the workload calls for. And then that kind of cuts the die size almost in half right there. And then you factor everything else in there. So if they do that, then that would be a whole new architecture. So who knows? I mean, we'll find out here soon. But it's going to be interesting. When it comes to GPUs, there is nobody better than Nvidia. They have the best GPU technology. But if you think about it, they're the only GPU manufacturer out there that needs GPUs. Everybody else makes other stuff, and GPUs are secondary. Exactly.
I just wanted to clarify that. Like, some people don't think that Turing is different, and I'm like, it has doubled the amount. It technically has doubled the amount of shaders as it says on the tin, basically.
Compared to Pascal,
because it has 3,000. Like, the 2080 has 3,000 shaders, but it actually has 6,000 shaders, because 50% of that, not so, I think it's like 25% of the die area is dedicated to different shaders that don't actually do gaming workload, except for like water and stuff.
Yeah, the FP16 stuff, it's not really used much.
Yeah. It's less complicated math. It's removing a decimal point or something.
Yeah, and that's where AMD, that's the only real advantage, is AMD's very good at doing more with less. And the fact that their shader cores, their FP32 shader cores, can do all the different math, that's the reason why, personally, I think they might just do software ray tracing and just use the internal shader cores to do it. Because if anybody's architecture can do all the math necessary, it would be AMD's. That's their one real advantage over Nvidia is in that part of their technology. Nvidia's got the efficiency, and AMD technically has the more efficient shader cores.
Yeah, it's still, if you know the way it's designed, it's like a wave 32 or wave 64. They could technically just dual shaders, so they could just basically have half of the shader dedicated to ray tracing, and half the shader dedicated to standard rasterized performance, and then you'd be effectively doing what Nvidia does, half their feckin' performance. That's what Nvidia do. Like, they half their performance, but if you've doubled the amount of shaders, like they're going, but this bollocks rumor, you're going to 8,000, right? Maybe that's what already an A2 is. 8 ECUs. So go to 8 ECUs. 50% of those are going to do. You'll get 5700 XT performance while ray tracing, or you can have double that performance in standard rasterized games.
That could do it. We'll find out soon. We'll find out all the information about this year. So that's what's great about this year, and that's what I'm looking forward to. The ray tracing stuff, and it'll pretty much point to what the next 10-ish years of gaming's going to look like. And yeah, so I'm pretty excited for that stuff this year. Yeah.
And the consoles, I'm really excited for them.
Well, the consoles are the ones that are going to dictate all of this.
Yeah. Come here, I better go. So I have to run.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks for joining me for this conversation. Go enjoy your time. I'm assuming you're going to go hang out with your wife.
That's it. Yeah, I'm going to sit on the couch and drink some wine, I think.
There you go. Now that's the way to end the day, my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys, buddy, and I'll have you back on here in the near future.